She was only 8 years old when she vanished from her own backyard. No footprints, no broken fence, no sound, just silence. And 9 years later, she walked into a police station with nothing but a name, a brass tag, and a story no one was ready to hear. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, do you believe every child who disappears is truly gone forever? Now take a deep breath and come with me to Asheville, North Carolina. It was 5:46 a.m. when the station lights flickered on. The air in Asheville was soaked in late September's quiet grief, the kind that settles over the town like fog and lingers longer than it should. The rain had fallen all night, drumming soft on rooftops and gutters, then retreating just before dawn, leaving behind streets slick and shining, beneath the dim glow of orange street lamps. A stop sign swayed at the corner, its bolts whining with each slow gust of wind. Sheriff Laura Griffin's boots echoed on the tile as she walked the narrow hallway of the station, the smell of burnt coffee already lingering in the break room. She didn't notice it anymore. Not after 28 years, not after the Carter case. The front lobby was still. She passed the faded corkboard where missing persons reports were tacked in uneven rows, most of them yellowed, edges curled. But one stood out, centered, laminated, framed like it was sacred. Emily Carter, age 8. Missing since October 3, 2013. Blue eyes. Shoulder-length brown hair. The photo was of a child laughing, a gap in her teeth, chalk on her shirt. Laura looked at it every morning, and every morning something new hit her. Sometimes it was anger, sometimes guilt. Today it was just the quiet recognition that she was still here, and Emily wasn't. The station phone rang once, then stopped, just long enough to be unsettling. Laura walked toward the front doors and paused. Something moved outside. A figure standing on the sidewalk, motionless, facing the glass. She stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat. It was a girl, soaked from the rain, thin, pale, wrapped in a maroon hoodie that clung to her like skin. She didn't knock, didn't wave, just stood there, looking in. Laura opened the door slowly, unsure if this was real. The girl raised her chin. Her eyes were wide and hollow in a way Laura had seen in war veterans or mothers after they identified a body. There was something unbearable in the stillness. The girl reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a crumpled paper. Laura took it. It was a black and white photocopy of Emily Carter's missing poster. The girl's voice came out raw, like it had forgotten how to form words. "My name is Emily Carter," she said. "I think I was kidnapped." Laura didn't speak, couldn't. Her brain stuttered through possibilities, runaway, mental illness, prank, but none of them made it past the way this girl looked at her, not searching, not pleading, knowing. Inside, Emily sat in interview room 3 with her hands folded on the table like she refused tea, flinched at water, wouldn't meet anyone's eyes for more than a few seconds. When asked if she needed medical attention, asked where she had been, she looked at the ceiling. The only thing she offered was a single object she had tucked into the waistband of her jeans, a necklace made from a piece of wire and a brass key tag. Stamped into the metal was the number 43. She let the evidence tech take it without protest. When he did, her hands curled into fists and her shoulders tightened. In the adjacent room, Laura stood with the town's social worker, Diane, and 2 detectives. The glass between them and Emily seemed thinner than usual, like it couldn't hold the weight of what sat on the other side. "That can't be her," said Jensen, one of the younger detectives. "It's not possible. She'd be 17 now. That girl looks older." "Or younger," Diane said quietly, "like someone who didn't get to grow." The silence was thick. The hum of the fluorescent lights above them became unbearable. At 6:41 a.m., Rachel Carter was called. She answered on the second ring. Her voice cracked when she heard Laura's. By 7:10, she was at the station, shaking so hard she couldn't open her car door. She ran inside, gasping, mascara already smudged. Her husband followed, trying to hold her arm, but she shrugged him off. When Rachel saw her daughter breathing, "Oh my God," she whispered, "that's her, that's my baby." But Emily didn't look up. She didn't move. Her gaze remained fixed on her own hands, as if they held the only truth left in the world. Rachel broke into tears. Laura tried to hold her up, but the woman slid to her knees in the hallway, sobbing into her palms. The husband knelt beside her. No one spoke. At 8:03 a.m., Emily finally asked to speak. Not to the detective, not to her mother, to Laura. Alone. They sat together in the room, the smell of cold metal and rain-damp clothes hanging in the air. Emily looked at the badge on Laura's chest, then to the mirror, then to the floor. "I was told not to talk," she said. "By who?" Laura asked gently. Emily's throat bobbed. "He said it wasn't safe until he was dead." Laura's breath caught. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Who said that?" Emily's eyes stayed on the floor. "My uncle," Laura winked. "You don't have an uncle," she said. "At least not one we ever found in the case files." Emily looked up for the first time. Her lips parted slightly. Her voice was quieter now, more like a memory than a statement. "You buried him 5 years ago." Laura went still. Everything inside her turned cold. She remembered 5 years earlier. A fire in the mountains. A hunter's cabin burned to ash. The remains found were unidentifiable, but a man's watch had survived. No name, no identity, presumed transient, presumed meaningless. But Emily was watching her now, watching her remember. And then, just before the silence swallowed them both, Emily spoke again. "He called it the Quiet House. There were others. I wasn't the only one." Outside the interview room, the hallway buzzed with the hum of too many people saying nothing. Jensen stared at the brass tag again, number 43, turning it over in his hand. He didn't know why it made him feel sick. In the evidence room, a photo hung crooked on the wall. Laura hadn't noticed it in years. It was the Carter backyard, the day after the disappearance, police tape, a swing set, a pair of pink Converse left in the grass. But if you looked close, if you really looked, you could see something behind the fence. A shadow. Not human, not quite. And that shape was wearing boots. The same boots found in the ashes of the fire 5 years ago, the same ones now missing from the evidence locker. Laura turned back to the room. Emily hadn't moved. Her eyes were closed now, lips parted, like she was praying or counting seconds. The storm outside had started again, but this time it didn't feel like weather. It felt like memory, crashing back. And somewhere beneath it all, something had just started to wake up. Emily Carter didn't remember the day she disappeared, not in the way people imagined, with screaming or blackouts or sudden terror. It was quieter than that, slower, like falling asleep underwater. Like standing in a room and feeling it gradually empty of air until you forget what breathing ever felt like. But she remembered the week before. It was early autumn in Asheville, and their backyard smelled like damp leaves and barbecue smoke. Emily had been drawing on the driveway again, her favorite thing. A maze, not a castle or a flower like the other girls at school. Mazes, tunnels with no exits, winding paths that doubled back. At the center, she always left a mark, a circle with a slash through it. Her brother used to say it was creepy, but she told him it was just a symbol for the middle. That's what she called it. The middle place. The night before she vanished, she sat on the porch steps with her mother Rachel, eating popcorn and listening to the cicadas rise and fall like sirens far away. Her dad was already gone by then. Emily never asked where to. She just knew his shoes weren't by the door anymore, and his smell wasn't in the hallway when she woke up. Her mom's hand was cold on her back that night, absent, stroking her hair without noticing the rhythm. "I'm going to marry someone nice," Rachel said suddenly. "Someone who's not a coward." Emily didn't answer. She didn't know what coward meant yet, but the way her mother's voice cracked on the word made it feel important. "I'm not mad at him," Rachel added. "I'm just tired of pretending I'm not." Emily stared at the woods beyond their fence, her knees tucked up under her nightgown. Something blinked between the trees. Not an animal. A reflection. Metallic. Gone before she could ask. The next morning was picture day at school. Rachel curled Emily's hair, pinched her cheeks, and wiped invisible smudges from her forehead. Tommy sat on the couch playing video games, pretending not to notice. He was 12 then. His voice had just started to drop. He had a new habit of slamming doors. "Tell her to smile for real this time," he slipped on her pink Converse. Rachel swatted his leg. "Tell her yourself." Emily didn't look at either of them. When they got to school, the photographer tried to fix her collar. She flinched at his hands. He stepped back, confused. She apologized. He took the photo anyway. It would be the one on the poster. The last image of her as a child. At night, her mother cried in the bathroom with the water running. Emily heard it through the wall. The pipe next to her bed clicked when the faucet was on. She counted the clicks sometimes instead of sheep. It was easier. Tommy talked to their dad on the phone sometimes. Emily knew because he always left the house to do. One afternoon, he forgot the phone on the porch. She saw the contact name, unknown, do not answer. She pressed play on the voicemail, a man's voice, familiar. "Happy birthday, bud. Sorry I missed it. I'll call back." She never mentioned it. Not to Tommy, not to anyone. There were things you didn't say out loud in their house, things that made the air shift. 3 days before she disappeared, her uncle came to visit. She didn't call him uncle back then. No one did. His name was Cal, her mom's older half-brother. He came around once or twice a year, always with odd gifts, antique coins, wire puzzles, a compass that didn't point north. He smelled like copper and gasoline, and he talked in riddles when he drank. He arrived unannounced, driving a beige truck with a dented bumper. He brought her a necklace that day, a thin wire loop with a brass tag. "It's from a hotel I stayed at once," he told her, eyes bright. "But I like to think it belonged to a room that doesn't exist anymore." She wore it, not because she liked it, but because when he looked at her, it was like he could see through skin and straight into the spaces that even she didn't know existed. Later that night, Rachel argued with him in the kitchen. Emily watched from the hallway. Her mother's voice was a hiss. His was too calm. "She's not yours to talk to like that," Rachel snapped. "She's blood," he said, "and blood listens." Emily didn't sleep that night. The wind knocked the gate open and shut, like someone breathing too hard. At school the next day, she bit another girl. It hard, just enough to leave a mark. No one understood why. Emily didn't either. She was sent home early. Rachel said she needed a reset. The evening air turned colder. The light in the backyard shifted. Tommy practiced. Emily traced the edge of her maze again in chalk, adding walls where none had. The last thing anyone ever saw of her was a small hand, pink shoes, and a line of chalk spiraling toward the back fence. And then she was gone. No scream, no dragging, no trace. Just the echo of a ball bouncing and a mother's voice calling dinner. That night, when they realized she was missing, Rachel ran into the woods barefoot. Tommy called her name until his throat bled. The police came, then the dogs, then the cameras. Laura arrived at midnight. The first thing she saw was the necklace in the grass. Wire. Brass. Tag 43. She bagged it as evidence. It was gone by morning. Rachel collapsed 2 days later. They gave her sedatives. Laura stayed. She searched the woods herself. She opened sheds, climbed under porches, questioned the mailman. Nothing. No signs of struggle. No footprints, no fibers, no DNA. Only the faint outline of a maze still visible in the driveway, being washed away by rain. Over the next year, their house began to rot from the inside. The fridge broke. The window seals shrank. The couch smelled like mildew. Rachel didn't eat. Tommy started punching holes in the walls. At school he was called the brother of the girl who vanished. He stopped correcting people. Cal didn't return. The family stopped talking about him. And then, 5 years after the disappearance, a fire broke out in the woods 20 miles north of Asheville. A hunter's shack burned to ash. One charred body. No ID, just a pair of boots and a melted watch. The case was never closed, but it was labeled accidental. Until now, because Emily remembered something. Not everything, but something. The color of the room, the noise the pipes made, the smell of bleach on blankets, and the voice, his voice, telling her not to scream, not because it would hurt, but because it wouldn't change anything. She had spent years there, in that middle place. But she had also left clues, scratches on walls, numbers carved into the underside of furniture, mazes drawn in corners no one would think to check. And then she waited for a fire, waited for death. Until someone else did. Someone new, someone younger, someone who screamed louder. And that scream cracked something open, a vent, a door, a memory, a truth. Emily hadn't left because she was brave. She had left because someone else couldn't. She hadn't returned for closure. She had returned for a name. Now, seated across from Laura in the interview room, her eyes finally met the sheriff's. And for the first time in 9 years, she smiled. But it wasn't joy. It wasn't peace. It was recognition. And then she said, "I remember what the number means now." Laura leaned in. Emily's voice was a whisper. There were more doors. I wasn't the first. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the station the radio clicked on, and in the distance, through the morning fog, someone stepped off a bus carrying a notebook in his hand. Inside was a maze, and in the center a symbol, a circle, slashed through. The first thing Emily asked for was a map, not a digital one, a real map, paper, folded, worn. She wanted to trace the roads by finger, not by algorithm. Laura found one in the glove box of her truck, a gas station copy of Buncombe County, creased and sun-stained. Emily spread it on the table like she was unwrapping a memory. She didn't explain why. She didn't have to. The way her finger hovered just north of Asheville over a curve in the highway that led nowhere was explanation enough. "There used to be a sign here," she said. "Blue, bent. It had a deer on it." Laura blinked. "That road leads to nowhere." Emily didn't answer. She tapped the map once, then again, saying, "I think that's where it started." At the station, things were already shifting. Jensen was quieter than usual. Diane, the social worker, began asking if anyone else had come forward with strange stories. Reports from surrounding towns began to trickle in. A woman in Arden claimed she recognized Emily from a bus stop years ago. A man in Fletcher said he heard children crying in the woods last spring, but thought it was foxes. The case had only been reopened for 24 hours, and already the ground was moving. But it was Rachel who changed most. The moment she saw Emily, something inside her cracked. Not relief, not joy, something darker, like guilt disguised as disbelief. She kept trying to hug Emily, who would not allow it. She brought photo albums. Emily didn't touch them. She asked questions. "Do you remember your favorite cereal? Do you remember your bedroom?" But Emily only asked for silence. Rachel stayed at the station for hours, then sat in her car long after, watching the front door, waiting for Emily to emerge or vanish again. She didn't want to take her daughter home. She wanted her daughter to prove she belonged. Meanwhile, Tommy returned from college after Laura called him. He hadn't seen his mother in 6 months. He walked into the station wearing the same high school hoodie from senior year and asked for coffee before asking about Emily. When he finally saw her, his mouth went dry. She was thinner, older, not in years, but in weight, like something had drained her slow. "Hey," he said. Emily nodded. He reached into his backpack and pulled something out. Them, as kids, Halloween. She was dressed as a bat. He was a zombie with ketchup on his shirt. "I still have this," he said. Emily stared at it, then looked away. Tommy sat down. The silence between them was enormous. "There's something I should say," he muttered. "Something I never told anyone." Laura watched them through the glass, heart in her throat. "I saw someone," he whispered. "The night you disappeared." Emily turned her head. "I didn't know what I saw. I thought it was a shadow. But it moved. It was in the trees." Emily's eyes didn't blink. "It had boots," he added. She nodded once, then looked away again. In the evidence locker, Laura began to re-review everything from 2018. One box in particular was missing, the one labeled Cal. Inside should have been his statement, a list of visitors to the house that week, an envelope with the necklace tag. Gone. She checked the logs. No one had signed it out. Then she found it, in the janitor's closet, behind a stack of salt bags for winter. It was open, and inside was a drawing, a maze, almost childlike. But in the center was the symbol again, the circle with a line through it, the same one Emily had drawn in chalk the day she vanished, the same one she now traced with her finger on the table when she thought no one was looking. Laura showed it to her. Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't draw this." Back in the town, things began to stir. Old neighbors started calling. The woman 2 houses down, Mrs. Langley, said she'd always thought something was off about Cal. "He watched the kids," she said, "but not like a man watches children, like a man watching his reflection." Another neighbor, Mr. Drew, said he remembered a strange car parked outside the Carter home the night Emily vanished. Beige. He'd mentioned it back then, but no. Now he remembered the plates. They traced them to a motel outside Weaverville. It had burned down 7 years ago. Inside, among the charred beams and crumbling plaster, a group of teens had once found strange things. Bones of small animals arranged in spirals, photographs with the faces scratched out, and a journal. That journal had vanished from the evidence archive, too. But someone had scanned a page before it disappeared. Laura read it under her breath. "They don't know where I am. They don't know what I've seen. But I am the middle, and the middle remembers." The handwriting was sharp, tight, obsessive. Emily confirmed it. "That's his. Cal's?" Emily shook her head. "No." She pointed to the map again, the curve in the road, the deer sign. "That's where he took me," she said. "But he wasn't alone." Laura leaned in. "What do you mean?" "There were others. I never saw their faces. But I heard them. He called them by numbers." "Like what?" 41, 42, then me. 43. Emily nodded. The doors had no locks, but they didn't need them. She said she had stayed in a room with no windows. The only light came from a bulb above the door and a small vent that whined at. Every morning she would find food on the tray. Every evening the maze would be redrawn on the wall, sometimes different, sometimes identical, but it was always fresh, as if someone painted it overnight. There was a hole in the floor. She never knew how deep, but she dropped things in it sometimes, screws, paper, a button. None ever made a sound at the bottom. One day she dropped a marble. It came back the next morning, on the tray, clean. Now Emily took out a scrap of paper from her pocket. She handed it to Laura, a list of numbers, dozens of them. Some crossed out, others circled. These were the other rooms. How many? I stopped counting after 60. Laura sat still. She realized with a sickness in her chest that the fire 5 years ago had not been accidental. Someone had tried to erase something and failed because Emily had survived. But now, maybe someone else hadn't. Laura brought in Diane. She showed her the drawings, the symbols, the numbers. Diane paled. "I've seen these before," she whispered. "Where?" "At a foster home outside Mars Hill, years ago. A boy used to draw them in the margins of his textbooks." "What happened to him?" "He ran away. They found him in a barn, hanged himself with a jump rope. The note said, "The middle isn't asleep anymore." Laura felt something twist inside her. That night she visited the fire site. The cabin was just a skeleton of beams now, but beneath the ash she found it. Another tag. Brass number 44. She didn't tell Emily, not yet. Instead, she brought Tommy back into the room. She wanted to test something. "Do you remember the day Cal came by?" He nodded. "He brought that necklace." Emily stared at the wall. "He asked me to show him the basement." "There's no basement," Laura said. Tommy looked confused. "There is," he said. "It's sealed. Concrete. Under the garage." Emily looked up. Her face changed. "I heard it," she said. "I heard someone crying there once. I thought I imagined it." Laura didn't wait. She drove to the Carter house that. Rachel answered the door in a robe, wineglass in hand. She didn't want them to come in. She said it was too late. But Laura pushed past her, and when she entered the garage, she saw it, a hatch in the corner, covered by an old rug, padlocked. Rachel said nothing. Laura cut the lock. The smell hit her first. Mold, dirt, something else. She climbed down and found it. A single room, bare, concrete, no windows. On the wall, a maze. In the center, the symbol, a circle, slashed through, and carved into the floor, faint but visible, 45. Laura stared at it, then called for backup. Rachel didn't resist arrest. She just asked for a cigarette. At the station, Emily waited by the window. She didn't ask where they went. She just stared into the night and whispered to herself, "If this is 45, then I was never the end." Laura hadn't slept. She sat in her office with the lights off, fingers buried in a stack of old files from the Carter case, reading every name, every timestamp, every marginal note she had ever written. There was a sharpness in her stomach, like she was chasing a ghost with too many faces. Outside, the morning fog hadn't lifted. The air was thick, still wet from the night rain, and the smell of decaying leaves filtered through the cracks in the station's old windows. The world felt slowed, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to tip over. Diane sat across from her, holding the folder with the photo of the basement floor, the number 45 carved into the concrete, faint but unmistakable. She hadn't spoken much since they returned from the Carter home. Neither had Rachel, who was now in a holding cell 2 floors down, refusing a lawyer, drinking only water, and humming softly to herself in a way that disturbed even the seasoned deputies. "She knew about the room," Laura said. Diane nodded. "She knew," Laura repeated. "She was protecting someone," Diane answered, almost mechanically. Laura looked up. "Emily?" "No," Diane said. The interview room's light above buzzed faintly. Emily sat alone at the table, fingers locked, gaze unfocused, rocking ever so slightly back and forth. She hadn't spoken since the discovery of the sealed basement. Tommy sat outside the door, hunched in a chair, head in his hands. He hadn't gone back to school. He said he wouldn't until this was over. But no one knew what over meant anymore. They brought in a forensic team to sweep the Carter property again. What they found buried in the crawl space wasn't human, but it was enough to make the team stop working for a full hour. A collection of personal items, drawings, stuffed animals, torn notebooks, each marked with a number. 43, 44, 45, 46. The numbers were burned into leather tags and nailed to the inside of a wooden crate. No blood, no bodies, just objects, memories, placed like offering. Laura walked the perimeter of the house twice, then she walked it again. The backyard fence, repaired just months after Emily vanished, had a post that was newer than the others. Underneath it, they found a rusted padlock and a snapped chain. She took it to Emily without explanation. Emily didn't flinch. "I know that sound," she said. "What sound?" "When the chain broke." Laura looked at her. "You heard it?" Emily didn't answer. "I was already gone. But I still heard it." In the station's cold storage room, Laura requested a copy of the fire report from 5 years earlier, the one that had supposedly ended Cal's life. The report had inconsistencies. The cabin listed in the file didn't match the location on the coordinates entered by the responding unit. The time of discovery was off by 4 hours. The coroner's notes mentioned a wristwatch, a pair of boots, and something else. Red cloth melted into the floorboards. But that detail had been omitted from the final summary. Laura called the retired officer who filed it. He didn't answer. She called again. Still nothing. She drove to his house outside Black Mountain that afternoon. No one answered the door. The mailbox was overflowing. She looked through the window. The kitchen table was set. 1 plate, 1 glass. A candle, half burned, untouched. Inside, the house smelled of something rotting. She kicked in the door. He was upstairs. Dead. Not from violence. From pills. Laid out neatly on the bed, face turned to the window, no note. Just a napkin, folded, on the nightstand. Written in pencil. The numbers go higher. Keep looking. Laura drove back to the station in silence. The napkin sat beside her on the passenger seat, fluttering slightly every time she made a turn. She felt a tightening in her chest that she couldn't name. Not fear, exactly, but something colder. A feeling that she was already too far in to turn back. At the station, Tommy was pacing in the hallway. He stopped when he saw her. "I remembered something," he said, eyes wide. "About Cal." Laura paused, keys still in her hand. "He used to say something to me when I was a kid, when Mom wasn't around." "What?" Tommy swallowed hard. "He said I wasn't meant for the middle, that it was meant for her." Laura stepped closer. "Emily?" He nodded. "I thought he was just being weird. I didn't think it meant anything." Laura stared at him, then whispered, "It always means something." She brought Tommy in to sit with Emily. They didn't speak at first. Then Tommy leaned forward. "I should have told someone what he said. I should have—" "You were a kid," Emily said flatly. "That's not an excuse." Emily finally looked at him. "Then don't make it one." Tommy blinked. She wasn't being cruel, just honest, just tired. Diane entered with a report from the psychiatric evaluator. It was short. Emily displayed signs of prolonged emotional isolation, possible sensory deprivation, and deep cognitive control. Someone had taught her not just to obey, but to adapt, to survive. "She's not broken," the report read. "She's organized." That scared Laura more than anything. At home that night, Laura poured herself a glass of wine and stared at the notebook she had been keeping, the one filled with theories, crossed-out names, and one phrase written again and again. "What is the middle?" She flipped back through the Carter files, through old transcripts. There, in a note she had written herself in 2013, buried in the margin, "Emily says her maze has no end." The next morning, they searched the woods again. This time, Emily led them, not with confidence, with memory. She pointed to trees that had been spray-painted red, to a pile of stones shaped like an arrow, to a metal rod sticking from the ground. They dug. Beneath it was a manhole, old, rusted, and under that, a tunnel. It stretched for miles, no lights, just wet concrete, and the sound of water dripping in the dark. Laura led the team inside. They walked for what felt like hours, then came to a door. Metal. Heavy. Number 47. Inside they found another room. Empty, except for a mattress, a toy truck, and on the wall, a maze. This one was different. It had an entrance, and at the center, 2 circles, both slashed through, side by side. Laura felt the hair on her arms rise. Diane stepped closer to the drawing. 2 centers, Emily was behind them. "No," she said. "A split." "What does that mean?" "It means I wasn't alone." They turned to her. There was someone else in 43. Tommy stepped forward first. "What do you mean, someone else? In your room?" Emily didn't answer immediately. Her eyes stayed fixed on the wall. on the maze. Her fingers twitched slightly, like they wanted to trace the lines. There were nights, she finally said, when I would wake up and someone else would be breathing next to me, not touching. Just there. Laura exchanged a glance with Diane. Did you ever see them? Once, Emily said. Only once. Her voice cracked on the word. It was a girl, maybe my age. But thinner. She had a scar on her forehead. She never spoke, but she used to hum. Diane looked stunned. What kind of hum? Emily closed her eyes. The room went silent, and then, in the dim tunnel air, she hummed it. It was the same sound Rachel had been humming in her cell, low, repetitive, familiar. Laura felt her stomach twist. Back at the station, they pulled Rachel into the interview room. She was calmer now, almost sedated. But when Laura asked about the song, her expression changed. I don't know, she said. It's just a tune, something from when I was little. From who? Diane asked. Rachel looked down. My mother. There was no record of Rachel's mother. Laura had assumed she was dead, but now the timelines didn't match. If Rachel had been raised by someone who knew the tune, and Emily had heard it from another girl in the Middle Place, then this went deeper, generational, systemic. Tell me about your childhood, Laura said. Rachel shook her head. It is now. Rachel finally looked up. My mother used to disappear, she whispered, for days, sometimes weeks. When she came back, she'd be different, distant. Did she ever take you with her? Rachel didn't answer. She just said, there was a red door, always a red door. Later that night, Laura searched through public records. She found an old property deed in Rachel's maiden name, outside of Leicester, an old farmhouse, long abandoned. She and Diane drove out there before sunrise. The house was crumbling. Ivy covered the walls. The porch sagged under their weight. Inside, everything was layered in dust, except one thing. A door in the cellar, painted red. It was locked. Laura kicked it in. Behind it, a staircase leading down. At the bottom, a corridor, and a door marked 42. The door creaked as Laura pushed it open. It was cold inside. No windows. Concrete walls, cracked and moldy. A single cot in the corner, a broken fan. Dust hung in the air like breath waiting to be exhaled. On the far wall, a mirror. But not a real one. Just polished metal, warped and dull. And below it, another maze, carved directly into the wall. This one different, messier, thicker lines. At the center, not a symbol this time, but a word scratched so deep the concrete had crumbled around it. Remember. Diane stepped back. Her voice was barely audible. This was built for containment. Laura said nothing. She moved toward the cot. Beneath the mattress, she found a box. Inside it, papers, photographs, a VHS tape wrapped in cloth, and something else. A child's shoe, pink, faded, the same size as Emily's when she disappeared. She called Emily, didn't explain why, just told her to come. When Emily arrived, she walked slowly through the house, touched the stair rail, paused in the living room like it was haunted, then descended the steps without speaking. She entered the red room, the mirror, the maze, and stopped. This wasn't mine, she said, but I know this place. She pointed to the wall. I'd dreamed of that mirror for years. Laura handed her the shoe. Emily stared at it. I never wore this. Diane asked, then whose was it? Emily's answer came slow, soft, unsteady. She called herself Claire. Laura froze. Claire? Emily nodded. She was the first one to draw the circle. Diane stepped back. Do you remember her face? Emily nodded, then whispered. She looked just like my mother. The silence in the red room was the kind that made your ears ring. Emily stood still, the worn pink shoe in her hand, her reflection distorted in the warped metal panel on the wall. She didn't speak again. Didn't need to. Laura, Diane, and Tommy stood frozen behind her, each of them feeling it, the shift, the crack in the logic of everything they thought they knew. Claire. A name that hadn't appeared in any file, not in Rachel's past, not in Cal's, not in any of the cold case documents Laura had reviewed 100 times over the last 9 years. But now, it echoed through the basement like it belonged here, like it had always been waiting. Emily turned to Laura. She used to whisper stories to me when he wasn't listening. Cal? Diane shook her head. No. Someone else. I never saw his face. He wore a mask. Tommy swallowed hard. What kind of mask? Emily's eyes narrowed, as if pulling the memory from a locked room in her mind. Black, like leather, with holes over the mouth. He smelled like bleach. The words scraped across Laura's mind like metal on stone. Her breathing slowed. He called us by number, Emily continued, but she called me Emily. She remembered. Do you think she was Rachel? Diane asked gently. Emily looked up. She was older than me. Maybe 15, maybe 17. And her eyes, she paused. They were mine. Back at the station, Laura ran a full search on Rachel's maternal records. What little existed was spotty, but a single document stood out, a sealed juvenile mental health intake form from 1993, labeled with a first name and a case number. Claire R. age at admittance, 14. No surname listed, no known parents. Psychological status, severe dissociation. Location, Asheville Children's Psychiatric Facility. Duration of stay, 21 months. Released to private care under state supervision. There were no further entries after that. Laura stared at the screen. Her hands went cold. She called the facility. It had been shut down in 2002. Records destroyed in a fire. Another fire. She stared at the timestamp. The intake date. Exactly 30 years before Emily walked into her station. She walked into the interrogation room. Rachel looked up slowly, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Laura placed the printed document on the table. Claire R., she said. Rachel blinked once. Her face didn't change. I don't know who that is. Laura leaned in. You don't? No. You want to know what I think? Laura said, voice low. I think Claire R. was your sister, or your daughter. Or maybe, just maybe, she was you. Rachel's hand twitched. According to this file, Claire disappeared from state care when she was 15. No record of her since. Rachel smiled, a small, broken smile. People disappear every day. Not like this. Rachel looked at the file again. Do you want to know what they called her in that place? Laura said nothing. They called her the Middle. The room fell silent. Rachel leaned back in her chair. Her voice was flat now, mechanical. She was there before Cal, before the tunnels, before the masks. They used her to test obedience, isolation. She didn't speak for a year. Was she your sister? Diane asked softly. Rachel didn't respond. She was me, she said. Tommy stood frozen outside the room, listening through the two-way glass. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes locked onto his mother's face. Emily didn't move. She didn't look surprised. Rachel kept speaking, her voice dull and rhythmic now, like someone reciting a bedtime story she had told herself 1,000 times just to stay sane. They shut that place down, but not before it did what it was meant to do. They fractured us, split us into parts. Claire was just one of them. Rachel was the name they gave me when I left. Diane whispered, Who's they? Rachel met her eyes. People who believed pain could create obedience, that you could erase memory through pattern and silence, that if you strip away identity, what's left is pure compliance. Laura said, You're saying Cal was part of it? No. Rachel said, No. Cal was created by it. Laura blinked. Created? He wasn't born into our family. He was placed there, groomed. He came to us when I was 16, said he was my brother, my protector, my blood. But he was just one of them, a continuation of the system. Tommy's voice finally broke through the speaker. Then why did you let him take her? Rachel closed her eyes. I didn't, she said. I made a deal. I was told they were restarting the program, a new location, same principles. They needed children, but not too young, not infants, ones that could learn, adapt, respond. Oh, she opened her eyes again. They came to me, said if I gave them one, just one, they'd leave me alone, forever. Tommy's hands balled into fists. You gave them your daughter. Rachel's voice cracked. I didn't choose her. I chose myself. Outside, Emily stood against the hallway wall. Her eyes were dry, focused, sharp in a way no child's eyes should be. She didn't know I would remember, she said. Laura turned. Remember what? Emily looked up at her. She wasn't the only one who made a deal. Laura stared at Emily. The fluorescent light above them buzzed faintly, casting a pale shadow across her face. Emily stood still, but her shoulders weren't tense anymore. They were steady, ready. What do you mean? Laura asked carefully. What kind of deal? Emily didn't look at her. I made a promise to someone else before I left. Diane stepped closer. To who? Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. To the girl in room 46. A silence fell across the hallway. Even Tommy stopped pacing. I wasn't supposed to be the one who got out, Emily said. She was, but she got sick, really sick. Fever, coughing, nosebleeds. They stopped feeding her when she couldn't stand. Her voice trembled now, barely, but enough. They said if I helped bury her body, they'd let me walk. Laura's stomach dropped. Emily blinked slowly. She wasn't dead yet. Diane's hand went to her mouth. They made me do it, Emily. They made me dig. Then they told me to shut the lid. I remember the sound when I did. I remember her fingers twitching. I remember the way she didn't scream. Tommy turned and vomited in the hallway trash can. Emily continued. Before they closed the box, she opened her eyes and whispered something. She said, "Don't let them erase me." And that's why you came back, Laura said, her voice barely audible. Emily nodded. She was my sister, she said. Not by blood, but she... Back in her office, Laura opened the box from the basement again. The VHS tape still sat there, wrapped in old cloth. She hadn't watched it yet. The label was smudged, almost unreadable. But one word remained, witness. She slid it into the station's old player. The footage was grainy, black and white. A concrete room, a chair, a figure seated, hands tied. Rachel? Or Claire? She looked much younger, her face gaunt, hair matted, eyes wide. A man's voice spoke from off-screen. State your number. Her lips didn't move. He repeated the command. She whispered, middle. There was a sharp sound, a slap or something like it. Then again, state your number. She looked at the camera and smiled. 43. The screen cut to black. Laura ejected the tape with shaking hands. It wasn't just a system, it was a legacy, and it wasn't over, not even close. That night, Laura didn't sleep. She drove, no destination, just roads. She replayed everything, the numbers, the rooms, the promises. Rachel, Claire, Emily, the girl in room 46, and the girl who was never buried. The legacy didn't start with Emily. It didn't even start with Claire. It was older, deeper, fed by silence and protected by systems too big to be traced. She called a friend at the Bureau, asked him to run a search, sealed cases, state contracts, experimental programs in child behavior management across North Carolina between 1970 and 1995. He paused on the other end of the line, then said, "You sure you want to open this?" Laura whispered, "I already did." He sent a file, codename, Echo Seed, initiated March 2, 1973. Location, undisclosed mental health institutions. Objective, long-term behavioral rewiring via environmental repetition and identity suppression. Status, discontinued. It officially, last modification, April 17, 2013. 2 days before Emily Carter disappeared. She printed the document and stared at the final page. A list of participants, each with a number. Each marked extracted, deceased, or for 3 names. Unknown. 43, 44. 45. Emily. The girl in the grave, and someone still out there. At dawn, a call came in from an old ranger station deep in the Pisgah forest. A hiker had found a structure buried into the hillside, metal doors sealed shut, numbers on the outside. 48. Laura left without telling anyone. She arrived just after sunrise. The trees stood like sentinels, and the air was wet with mist. She opened the doors with a crowbar. Stairs descended into darkness. She followed them. At the bottom, a hallway, the same concrete, the same dripping pipes, and at the end, a room. Inside, a chair, a table, and a file. She opened it. Inside, a photo, black and white, a girl, not Emily, not Rachel, younger, hair braided, smile wide. A date written beneath it, April 12, 1981. And a name, not a number, Laura. Behind her, the metal door slammed shut. It took them 3 hours to find her. Laura had been underground the whole time. No flashlight, no phone signal, just her breath and the silence. A silence so absolute it felt like it had weight. She hadn't screamed when the door closed behind her. She hadn't even moved for the first 5 minutes. She just stared at the photograph in her hands. She had no memory of that picture being in. But it was her. The soft chin, the little freckle beneath her eye. She had never known it was there. The moment she was pulled out, Emily was already waiting. She didn't ask where Laura had gone. She only said, "You look like someone who forgot who they were." Tommy drove Laura home that night. He didn't speak until they were halfway back to town. "You think you were part of it?" he finally asked. Laura didn't answer. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. Tommy kept his eyes on the road. "We're all pieces of someone else," he said. "We just spend our lives trying to figure out which ones we want to keep." At the station, Diane reviewed the Echo Seed file again. She noticed something Laura hadn't. On the final page in the bottom corner, beneath the list of numbers and names, was a stamp. Replicated. Pending next generation. She closed the folder. Emily sat alone in the quiet room, drawing a maze. Different this time, more open, less defensive. At the center, a small house, with a tree and 3 windows, one open, the others shut. Diane asked what it meant. Emily didn't explain. She just kept drawing. In her cell, Rachel had stopped humming. She sat still now, looking through the glass like she could see something miles away. When Diane entered, Rachel asked only one question. "Did she remember me?" Diane nodded. Rachel closed her eyes and finally cried. Rachel didn't speak for the next 2 days. No visitors, no questions, just silence. Emily asked to see her. Laura hesitated, but Emily insisted. They met in the same interview room where it had all started. When Rachel entered, she looked smaller than before. Not older, just reduced. Like someone whose past had finally caught up to the shape of their body. Emily didn't look away. "Do you know what I remember?" she asked. Rachel didn't answer. "I remember the sound of your voice through the wall." Rachel blinked. "You used to sing," Emily said, very quietly, "like you were afraid someone would hear." Rachel's lip trembled. "I wasn't singing to you." Emily nodded. "I know, but I listened anyway." "You lied," Emily said, "and then you kept lying, even when I came back." Rachel's eyes filled, but she didn't. "I was broken," she said. Emily's voice stayed steady. "You stayed broken." Rachel's mouth opened, but no. "I want to know the truth," said. "All of it." "Your real name was supposed to be Claire." Emily froze. "I tried to name you after her," said. "Not for what they did to her, but for who she was before." "Oh." Emily stared for a long time, then said, "I'm not her." Rachel nodded. "I know. You survived." Emily stood, walked to the door, then stopped. Without turning around, she said, "I don't forgive you, but I'm done carrying you." And then she left. Rachel wept. Not loudly, not for pity, just quietly, as if mourning the person she could have been. That evening, Tommy took Emily out of town. They didn't tell anyone where they were going, just drove. North. Through winding roads and slow turns and stretches of highway lined with pine and fog. They didn't speak until they reached the lookout point where they used to go as kids. He parked the car. Emily stepped out, pulled her hoodie tighter, and stared at the valley below. "You think we ever had a chance?" she asked. Tommy leaned against the hood of the car. "I think we had each other." Emily nodded. "That's something, right?" Tommy smiled, just barely. "It's everything." They sat in silence. Two siblings, both survivors, both haunted by memories they didn't choose, and by the knowledge that survival wasn't the same as escape. Back in town, Laura stood in front of her bathroom mirror. She held the photo, the one from the Echo Seed file, the little girl with the braids, the one with her face. She looked into her own eyes and whispered, "Who made you?" There was no answer, no rush of memory, just a quiet acceptance that her origin had been stolen long before she could claim it. She didn't need the file anymore. She burned it, in the sink, page by page. The next day she submitted her resignation, not because she was giving up, but because she was ready to stop chasing ghosts that lived inside her. Emily returned to the station that night, not to stay, just to say goodbye. She left a box on Laura's desk. Inside it, a folded map, a hand-drawn maze, and the brass tag. Number 43. Taped to it, a note. "The middle didn't win. I did." It started with a girl walking into a police station. That's how the headlines told it. Not with the years of silence, the nights spent counting drips in a pipe, the maze drawn and redrawn until it became muscle memory. Not with the sound of dirt falling on wood, or the weight of promises made to someone who would never wake up. Just, child missing for 9 years returns to police. They didn't print her real story. They didn't print any of theirs, not Rachel's, not Laura's, not Tommy's. And definitely not the girl who was never named. But some stories were never meant for paper. They were meant for memory. Emily Carter left Asheville 6 weeks after the final interview. No one knows exactly where she went. She emptied her bank account, bought a used Jeep, packed only what she could carry. The house was sold. Rachel pled guilty to obstruction and conspiracy. No trial, no appeal. She accepted it all like someone who had already served a life sentence in her own mind. Laura moved out of town. She didn't change her name. She didn't run. She just stopped needing to know. Diane stayed. She started a program for survivors of long-term captivity. She used a different name for it. She called it Room 46. Tommy graduated late. He wrote a thesis called The Geometry of Grief. No one understood it, but everyone who read it cried. And Emily? One day she mailed a letter to Laura. No return address, no explanation, just a single page, a drawing, a maze. And at the center, not a circle, not a line, not a number, but a window, open. And beneath it, in her handwriting, "Sometimes surviving is the loudest revenge." Years passed. The case became a whisper, a reference point for other missing persons, a cautionary tale for parents, a quiet pain that never made it into the books. But for those who lived it, the story never ended. One day, in a small town 5 states away, a young woman walked into a community center. She didn't give her name. She asked for a job, said she had experience with maps. They hired her to sort books in the children's section. She read to the quiet kids, the ones who didn't talk much, the ones who flinched at loud noises, the ones who stared too long at windows. She told them stories that didn't have endings, just mazes. And when one little girl asked her why all her drawings had that same strange symbol in the middle, the circle with a slash through it, she smiled, bent down, whispered in her ear, "It means you're not lost. It means you're still finding your way." And the girl believed her. because her voice didn't shake, because her eyes didn't lie, because sometimes the people who survive aren't the loudest. They're just the ones who know how to leave the door open behind them, even when no one else remembers how to find it. And in the quiet, long after the girl left the room, a paper maze sat on the table, unfolded, unfinished, waiting, just like her.